Oh, hi. I'm going to get us started. Today, there's two of us, two groups of us, and we're going to start out with shared print in the Orbis Cascade Alliance. I'm Zan Arch from Reed College. I'm speaking with my colleagues Jim Bunnelle and Jill Emery. Okay, first of all, a little bit about shared print as we're talking about it today. Some of the things that we're talking about it for is how it was early collaborations of collection development that helped us use our resources, both financial and space-wise, with some partner libraries in a way that wouldn't be any burdensome for any particular library. It allowed us to combine resources to buy more expensive materials, especially primary source materials that we could not otherwise afford or house. And it showed for our stakeholders they were working with other local libraries, and we could provide expanded access beyond our own walls. And later it allowed us to shift materials from the library that would use them to the library that used them the most, and take it away from libraries that were having more space issues. So for our area, one of the first efforts in this was the Northwest Association of Private Colleges and Universities in Washington and Oregon. The first project for this group was we received a grant to fill journal gaps with some emphasis on environmental studies, urban studies, and minority American materials, which were identified as important for our region. And we filled those gaps by acquiring microform in most cases. The second major project, which we're going to focus on for our talk today, is the acquisition of the British parliamentary papers. So this was 1979. Between the three of us, we're not really sure why we wanted this, but now we have it, 1,000 volumes, and it was divided between the primary contributors, which is Portland State, Lewis-Clark, and Reed. We were the primary financial contributors, and we also housed most of the volumes, with a few indexes going to the other schools in the area. So now, many, many years later, this is not ideal for us. So we're going to have my colleague Jim will talk about some of the problems.
I should say we were the main holders of all of these volumes, so we were the ones who initiated, let's have a discussion on this, since it's taking up so much shelf space. Lewis and Clark were in the middle of a shelf, a space plan 12 years out, so we're looking at things like legacy print collections, how can we relocate materials, and the BPP came up as part of those discussions. I'm going to highlight some of the problems that we had through this project. One of the problems that we had was just exactly who participated in the original program. Of the 21 NAPCU schools that were in NAPCU at the time, only 7 were listed on the book plates that were put in each volume. So it seems that all of the schools were not involved at the same level. And we also, we did not know how they were paid and how that was distributed, how those payments were broken up between the institutions. One other, and I'll talk about these other, the retention in just a bit. Completeness was another issue. We didn't know who still had the indexes from the original schools that purchased them. We didn't know what expectations there were from the other schools as far as, Lewis and Clark still holding them, or even if they even knew that the BPP still existed. It's been so long. And the other issue was shifting collection priorities of past participants. At Lewis and Clark, all of the volumes originally moved to Lewis and Clark because our British history faculty wanted that for research. But our curriculum has changed over time. So at the time, we're doing a lot of British history. And since then, we've branched off into a lot more multidisciplinary courses dealing with imperialism, subaltern studies, colonialism. So the usefulness of the materials has shifted over time in our own institution, and possibly the same curricular priorities at other institutions could reflect those same realities. Again, the holding responsibility was skewed towards Lewis and Clark. It takes up a really large footprint. Now here's the photo. Dramatic Citizen Kane style photo here of the collection. So that actually is the entire range, the same section on the other side, and then it wraps around. So it's a really large footprint in the building. And it's also located right behind one area of access services that we want to use for staff space during the space plan. On the right side is the book plate of the actual institutions that were involved in the purchase part. So this book plate actually informed us early on about who had contributed the most money. So to know who to have those discussions with in the future. Okay, so records management ended up being one of the big issues here, and the biggest issue for me was that there was no memorandum of understanding about how long we needed to retain these materials. Jill and I kind of engaged in this kind of collaborative sleuthing where we were digging in file cabinets at PSU and Lewis-Clark trying to find any kind of documentation from the time period, and that took a long time, so we sort of cobbled together things from different sources. But at the end of the day, we realized that there really was no MOU to speak of. We found a breakdown of the prices so we could see who paid what, and we found some other information about NAPCU that was helpful for purposes of having these discussions. But in the end, the MOU was missing. So what else? So there were two movements of volumes from PSU over 2 different periods of time, which resulted in us having the entire run, except for a smaller run that's at Reed, of 20th century materials, or materials dealing with U.S., I believe. So our faculty were the ones using them, so we removed them from PSU's storage and brought them to Lewis-Clark. Again, at that time, there was no discussion about how long we would keep these materials. And at the time, we weren't pressed for space, so it really wasn't an issue. But as those realities or stacks have been encroaching on us, we've been looking at things like that, trying to decide what to do. So the BPP is one of the main, next to the Union catalog, the biggest space hog in the building that we have space-wise for print. And I'll turn it over to Jill now, who's going to discuss some other parts.
All right, so what did we learn? We learned print documentation is never complete, especially in this instance. And it took us a really long time digging through file cabinets to really find what we needed. And it took, I would say, a month and a half of digging through file cabinets before we found all the documentation that we could find. There were some emails that were recovered thanks to one person kind of having a memory of discussions about this and being able to do some searches and find the email from an email service that we're not even using anymore in Portland State. I will say if you're a Google institution or Gmail, the minute that person leaves and their Gmail account is wiped out, that's gone. You won't have that as documentation in the future. So thinking about how you want to document things and go back and trace things, especially via email, it's becoming more and more important for us at this point. It really was, for all of us, institutional memory that kind of saved the day. There was one employee at Lewis-Clark who had been involved at least in the moves, and so had some memory of that and what occurred. And it was the same with Portland State. We had one employee who was still working for us, who'd been involved with like the shift of the volumes and could remember some of the information around that. But if it hadn't been for that, we kind of would have been completely lost. So of course this had us thinking, okay, what do we do now? What do we have to try to come up with and think about, especially with shared print going forward? All 3 of us participate in WEST, and we, which is the Western Storage Trust. And, you know, we have learned a lot from that experience and being involved in that, of having the exit strategy and knowing when the term limit is kind of up of the shared print, and then thinking about what you would need to do as next steps. We really had to think about, and we're still kind of thinking about this, I think, at our 3 institutions, kind of the statute of limitations for participation. Because we did this back in the 60s and 70s, do we still need to be doing this in the 21st century? And is it really still applicable to us? Are we still wedded to this sharing? Being willing to walk away from the past practice just because it had been done doesn't mean it has to continue to be done. And we really need to think about that and evaluate what should be our strategy going forward. And the other thing we found is when we started to ask faculty about whether this material was important to them, they started building assignments around the content. And so being too public about it could also be somewhat problematic. So our questions are, what are we going to do now? We're definitely going to write a new MOU that we all agree to about what should happen with the print material going forward. We are in the consideration of a joint purchase of the electronic version and what we should need to do to make that happen. And to that point, Reed has already gone ahead and pretty much bought the electronic version that covers their volumes so they can get rid of them. And we're also going to need to determine if there's any institutions left that want any of the print volumes. We're kind of pretty much agreed, I think, among the three of us that we're not really wanting to keep it. But when it comes down to nobody wants to keep it, will that really be satisfactory to everybody? So we kind of have to work that out as part of the new MOU that we use. So that's our portion of the presentation. Do we want to go? We'll probably go to the Colorado Alliance and then circle back to questions.
Yeah. All right. Great. Let me figure out how to get to the other deck. I'm not a Windows person. Why is it not doing that? There we go. All right, good. Okay, so actually it was really great that they went first, because what they were talking about doing next in terms of an MOU and agreements up front is what we are now working on in the Colorado Alliance. So we are, the Colorado Alliance of Research Libraries is 14 libraries. It's 13 of us are academic. Denver Public Library, which is a research institution, is also a member, and then University of Wyoming. So even though we are the Colorado Alliance, we include Wyoming. And we have a bunch of different programs. We do e-resource licensing. We do importantly, we have a shared union catalog. It's an InReach system, Prospector, which allows us to share things within the Colorado Alliance and with other libraries in the state that are not members. And this is a really strong program, and we've grown reliant on sharing print resources among each other, which is important when you think about developing a shared print program within the state. We have a history of software development and innovation, and we've decided that we wanted to try building our own tool to help us with this project, and George will talk about that. So why do we need another shared print program? We talk about this all the time. This is not the first time we've talked about it within Colorado. But it seems like it's time to talk about it again and to be really intentional about it. We're certainly all running out of room in our libraries and in our storage facilities, and that's not unique to us. We've also got several renovation projects underway within the state, so there are people who have very pressing needs to deaccession some portion of print materials. Prospector and this really strong resource sharing network within the state makes it possible for us to intentionally deduplicate print and yet still provide access to each other. We have an ever greater reliance on ebooks within the state, which means that we probably don't need as many copies of print titles across the state. And we have several storage facilities within the state. So several of us have our own, there's the CU system has a shared storage facility, and then several of us have our own individual storage facilities, which means that we are already committed to long-term retention of some of this stuff, at least in some places within the state. So some key features of what we're trying to do. We want it to be distributed. We don't want to try to force people to build a single journal run, for instance, at one institution. We don't have a shared storage facility, and each library can maintain their own holdings within this program. It's voluntary, so libraries can join the program but can participate as much or as little as they wish in particular aspects of the project. And importantly, no one's forced to discard a volume. We're trying to create a mechanism where when you do need to discard, you can do so with confidence that you won't be discarding the last copy in the state and Wyoming. It's flexible, so we can expand it as needed in terms of different format types and even adding libraries in. And it also allows libraries to participate in other programs. So some of us are members of WEST, for instance, and we can participate in WEST and our commitments to West might carry over to our commitments to the Colorado Alliance. We signed a memorandum of understanding that it's signed by participating institutions. Not every library in the Alliance is forced to participate, and at least one institution chose not to sign. But everybody benefits. And in particular cases, if we have a partner institution, for instance, we have the Iliff School of Theology, which shares a catalog with us and shares a lot is basically on our campus. We could bring them in for a particular program if we wanted to. We established the Alliance Shared Print Trust with this MOU. It's a distributed repository, and the participants agree to retain materials on behalf of the group, and we disclose these retention decisions to each other so that we can be confident that particular title is being held by somebody in the state. It's not about the specific programs. It's a framework that we can use to establish specific programs around monographs or serials, and we can expand it as needed. And we've built in a 25-year commitment, which can be reviewed every 5 years and decreased if we feel that we need to, or increased if we feel like we need to. We've built, we're going to have a series of last copy policies, and these define both policies and procedures for the last remaining copy in the Alliance. And I think it's important to note that a library can determine that something is a last copy before it actually is the last copy. So if we have a collection that we know we're going to keep for whatever reason, we can designate those volumes as last copies, and then other libraries can go in and say, it's already been determined to be a last copy, and I have another copy, I can get rid of it if I want to. Libraries can also withdraw and then donate copies to other libraries in the state if that's what they want to do. And we had to be very clear that we were withdrawing them, taking them out of our collections. We were not giving them to each other because we're not allowed to do that. For specific formats, we're building these policies, and we already have a monographs policy in place that we've approved, and we've got a serials one that should be approved soon. And then potentially we could focus on specific projects that are not necessarily format related. So we could do something that's on Colorado imprints or something. We have a disclosure policy as well, which defines how in the catalog record you record these retention decisions and report these decisions to the community. And it uses the same sort of format that is used in West, and we can then allow for multiple retention commitments for the same item. So for example, you could have a West commitment and an Alliance commitment for the same volume. Documentation is available on the Colorado Alliance website, and we will, as we add more documentation, as we add more specific policies for formats, we'll include them at this site. So now I'll turn over to George.
So I'm not going to repeat what Michael just said, but one of the things that we wanted to do in starting our program was to have some analysis tools so that we could actually work together. And so we actually initially started by looking at some of the commercial products out there: Total Assessment, OCLC Collection Evaluation, SCS Green Glass. These are all excellent in various different ways, but one of the big challenges was we couldn't afford them. And so we said we'll build our own, and that's based on this concept that we do have a history of innovation. We have developers in our office, and we just finished up some other projects. So we decided to turn our attention to shared print. you never say never, but it's not on the midterm horizon.
I have two questions, but one of them is to follow up on the Colorado tool. You mentioned that, I'm Danielle Westbrook from the California Digital Library and also from the Western Regional Storage Trust. So you mentioned that the match is on MARC elements and not dependent on OCLC number or ISSN, but I'm wondering if it's not dependent, but are those still, like the unique records that you've identified, is there a process to go back and check to see if there are OCLC numbers and ISSNs within those?
Well, we're certainly loading raw MARC records from each site, which includes OCLC numbers, ISBNs, ISSNs. We're not throwing anything away. So all of the data is in there, and we're including the MARC records separate and discrete for each institution. So what's interesting is we don't have a master record, we have a master match key. So the match key is what sort of, if you will, is the master record, and then the individual MARC records hang off of that. So, but all of that data are there, but we're not using it for matching purposes because it doesn't work consistently due to old data, as well as maybe due to certain special. Think about media records, for example, if you have a DVD collection, they wouldn't have very likely any of those fields. So.
And then my other question is for the Orbis Cascade Alliance. I'm wondering if now that you have developed an MOU, do you think as a group you're more likely to enter into new prospective print purchasing? Just thoughts on that.
Probably not. This was more of a take care of old business, at least from my perspective at Lewis-Clark. Take care of old business and possibly get a digital version of surrogate of something that we already have in print. So that was my own perspective. I don't know if Jill feels differently. If you want to embark on some large print, okay. That was the main thrust of the project, was sort of just to wrap it up and to have some kind of end plan for this thing.
Hi, I'm Susan Stearns from the Boston Library Consortium and the EAST Project. And I guess this is mostly a question for you, George. Do you have plans to integrate your retention information outside of your own union catalog and make it available more widely through WorldCat or other sources? Yeah, so in our disclosure policy, one of the things we talk about is disclosing that 583 field in your local catalog. It will also then automatically roll into the union catalog. And then we made it optional, but we did explicitly talk about moving those retention decisions into OCLC and or maybe to paper. So once again, though, we didn't make that a requirement, but I think it's strongly encouraged. Would you say, Michael?
Yeah.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Zach English from Florida Atlantic University. Just have a question about resource sharing. Did the libraries in your consortia collaborate on interlibrary loan checkout periods? Beforehand, did they have like different checkout periods, and was that a need to collaborate on those when this project was undertaken?
Yeah, so we've run a union catalog since 1999, and back then we developed a set of policies that allowed people to, in a sense, share through the union catalog for 3 weeks plus one renewal, which means 6 weeks. We also have loaded in the CRL record, so if you borrow one of those, we've set it up for the maximum amount of time that CRL allows. We also then have a limit of 70 borrows per person at the same time. So those policies have been in place for over a decade. One of the challenges we have is our union catalog is both public and academic libraries. So I think if it was a pure academic consortium, it'd be very easy to really stretch things out because of declining print use. People are comfortable. The public library people are very concerned that if you make those too liberal, bestsellers and popular items would be just gone forever, which creates havoc in a public library sector.
I think we're pretty much at time, so if you'd like to join me in thanking the panelists.